In this video, I want to talk about things that I'm really missing in JavaScript, and I hope that people will implement it in future versions of it. And the first thing that I want to see in JavaScript is static typing. And actually people are using nowadays TypeScript just to bring static typing to JavaScript. But actually it is not a native way to create an application, because actually we simply write TypeScript code and when we transpile it to JavaScript, which actually means we don't have TypeScript, in production we still have JavaScript with all its problems. And actually, if you are not familiar with TypeScript at all, I highly recommend you to look on it, because this is the future of JavaScript and more companies are using it every day. So why do we need static type checking inside JavaScript at all? The main problem is that applications nowadays are much more complex than they were before. We have the whole business logic and state management inside JavaScript. We also have single-page applications, which doesn't make it easier. And it is much more difficult to develop an application just with plain JavaScript without any validation or data types, which help you developing an application. And the main problem, if you will compare TypeScript with, for example, C#, is that we are losing the whole TypeScript when we are coming to build version of JavaScript in production, which actually means all our data types are completely erased and we have just plain JavaScript. And it is not like this in other type languages, because for example inside Java or C# we have these data types inside build version also, which actually means we can use data types in production. In our case in JavaScript it is not possible. You can't use some data type and check the type of the variable and think that it will work later inside production, because actually you will have the JavaScript and all our data types are stripped off, and this is not convenient. This is why it would be really nice if we will have something like TypeScript by default with JavaScript. The next thing that I really hate is transpiling JavaScript in older versions of JavaScript. So I'm talking here about using Babel or other transpilation tools which brings newer features inside JavaScript, and we can use it already today across all browsers. And this is all nice, but transpilation really takes a lot of time. And the main problem here that we're getting newer features inside JavaScript every single day. And all these browsers can't really support all these features out of the box. This is why we need transpilation of our code, so this code that we're writing with newer features will be transpiled in the browsers where it is not supported in the older variant. But there are two main things that I hate about it. First of all, it is impossible to debug. You have something like Webpack plus Babel, then you can enable some features, you don't have a clue how it is all transpiled and how you can debug it. Then you have some strange error with regenerator runtime, for example, or another tool which is used inside, and then you can spend hours just in debugging these issues, because the process of transpiling our code is extremely complicated, and the output that you will see is also quite huge. This is why what I really want to see is some other approach to work with JavaScript, like in other languages. Obviously I want to use newer features of JavaScript, but I don't want to use transpilation until the end of my life. The next thing that really bothers me is the lack of good functions inside JavaScript itself. For example, we can talk about working with URL or parsing query parameters. And here is the most popular package to parse query strings. It is called query string, and actually people are using it in every single project. And you can see here the weekly downloads. And essentially what this library does, it parses your query strings from location, or it stringifies it. And this is it. And actually I expect this functionality to be implemented inside JavaScript itself. This is exactly what we need in every single project. It is not something that you will make only once in your life. So I really want to see a bunch of functions to do whatever I want with URL. For example, read different parts like maybe location, hash, pathname, whatever you want, add parameters, remove parameters, generate URLs with parameters, and whatever possible. Exactly the same I can say about working with states. Working with dates in JavaScript is extremely lacking and not comfortable at all. This is why a lot of people are using different libraries. For example, the most popular ones are Luxon. As you can see here, for example, we can write datetime now, we're getting our local time, then we can set zone, so time zones are already there, then we can write, for example, -1 week, end of day, and we're getting our nice date in the readable format. Exactly the same you can get if you are using other library datefns. Here you can also generate dates, calculate intervals, and work with time zones. But all this stuff does not exist out of the box inside JavaScript, and there is no comfortable way to work with dates at all. And this is also something that I consider should be implemented on the level of JavaScript itself. Another thing that bothers me a lot is working with data transformations inside JavaScript. We simply don't have enough methods to work efficiently and transform our data. For example, let's look on something simple. We have sort function inside JavaScript, and actually it is all nice, but here is the usage. We're writing something like item sort, where we're getting A and B, and here we're writing some magic. And typically you know how sorting is working, so you are getting something less than 0 or bigger than 0, but it is not comfortable. This is simply low-level approach to implement sorting. And yes, you can implement whatever you want with sorting, but typically people want to write their code easier. For example, we can look on Lodash library. This is one of two most popular libraries to do data transformations. And here we have a function which is called sort by. And here directly you can see the difference. We don't have just a sort low-level function, we have a sort by function. And this is what you typically want. You have an array of objects and you want to sort them by some criteria. For example, here we're writing sort by, here is the array of our users, and we simply set here as a second argument array of our keys. And this is exactly keys, for example, user, you can see here user age, and these are keys how we want to sort it. And for example, if we need to sort it ascending or descending, so we want to provide an order, here we can simply use order by our users. Here we're providing keys how we want to sort it, and we want to sort our user ascending and our age descending. And this is exactly superhuman readable. You don't really need to think a lot to understand this line. But actually here when we're talking about native sort, it is nice, but it is super low level. And the same I can say about hundreds of other functions inside libraries for data transformations. For example, here inside Lodash we have lots of different functions. As you can see, the list is enormous. And actually I want to see at least 90% of such functions inside JavaScript, because the things people are using every single day. Things like, for example, capitalizing, or you want to compact your array and remove all nulls and undefine it, or maybe you want to find an intersection between two arrays. You see these libraries for data transformation in every single project for a reason, because we are lacking the amount of good functions inside plain JavaScript. And also, if you're interested to learn what are most popular JavaScript interview questions and how to solve them, make sure to check this video also.